Man in the Iron Mask is improvisations and additions to a rather simple original story.
A prisoner locked away for decades, his face hidden behind a mask, his name erased from every record. For centuries, the mystery of the man in the iron mask has fascinated the world. Was he a royal twin, an illegitimate heir, or someone whose secret could topple a king? Writers like Voltaire and Dumas turned him into legend, but now historians claim they have finally solved the mystery. And the truth, according to reports, is nothing like the glamorous tales we grew up with. Historians finally solved the Iron Mask mystery, and it's not good. The question is, are you ready? A prisoner without a name. In the late 17th century, France was a kingdom of grandeur, spectacle, and absolute monarchy, where the Sun King Louis XIV ruled with unmatched authority. Versailles dazzled the world with gold and marble. Armies marched in his name, and the king's word carried the force of law. Yet even in this age of splendor, a shadow crept through the corridors of power, a secret that no one dared speak too loudly. Somewhere in the depths of France's prison system, a man lived and died with his identity locked away from history. He was escorted under heavy guard, transferred from fortress to fortress, and compelled to wear a mask so his face could never betray who he was. This mysterious figure would later be remembered only as the man in the Iron Mask. The very first hints of his existence came from scattered prison records and letters, carefully worded to avoid revealing too much. His name never appeared clearly, only aliases and vague descriptions. Guards were given strict orders not to speak of him, to obey instructions without question, and to treat him with a degree of care unusual for an ordinary criminal. One official even noted that this prisoner was fed better than the rest, lodged in special cells, and often traveled with an entourage of soldiers. Why would the French crown go to such lengths to conceal and protect one man, while also ensuring he was never free? That question has echoed through the centuries, like a riddle no one can quite solve. By the time the story began circulating in the salons of Paris, it had already transformed into legend. Voltaire, the great Enlightenment writer, claimed in his Siècle de Louis that the prisoner wore an iron mask and was treated with extraordinary respect. Alexandre Dumas took the tale further in his novels, spinning an unforgettable story of royal intrigue, hidden brothers, and betrayal at the highest levels of power. The image of a man whose face was never seen, forced to live behind an iron cage for his features, gripped the imagination of Europe. Was he the king's twin, a bastard son, or some powerful noble who knew too much? The mystery was too delicious to ignore. Yet behind the romantic visions of literature, the real man's life was far harsher. He spent decades in cells ranging from the mountain fortress of Pignerol to the damp walls of Exilles, and finally to the island prison of Sainte Marguerite, before being transferred to the Bastille. Wherever he went, secrecy followed. At times, he was forced to cover his face in public, and at others, the mask may have been velvet rather than iron, a detail that later writers exaggerated into legend. Still, the symbolism was clear. Whoever he was, the French crown considered his very appearance too dangerous for the world to see. The accounts of his death in 1703 only deepened the enigma. Records at the Bastille mention a man dying under the name Marchioli, a false identity assigned at the last moment. Even his burial was disguised, his possessions destroyed, his cell scrubbed of any trace of his existence. All that was left behind was silence, an intentional void designed to erase him. It is this silence that fueled centuries of speculation, for when the state works so hard to bury a secret, people cannot help but wonder what they are trying to hide. For over 300 years, historians, novelists, and conspiracy theorists have struggled to put a name to the faceless prisoner. More than 50 different candidates have been suggested, ranging from disgraced diplomats to illegitimate royals. Each theory carried its own weight of intrigue, but none could be confirmed beyond doubt. The closer researchers looked, the more contradictions they found, as if the truth had been deliberately scattered to mislead anyone who came searching. In a world where Louis XIV staged his very life as a performance of power, this hidden figure became the ultimate unsolved act. The story of the Man in the Iron Mask endures not simply because of who he might have been, but because of what his existence suggests about secrecy, fear, and the brutality of absolute rule. To this day, his name remains absent from official history, a ghost lingering in the margins of archives. What could make a king so desperate to erase one man? That question is where the mystery truly begins, and it is the reason people still search for answers even now. For if the mask comes off, what will the world see? Clues hidden in the archives. If the Man in the Iron Mask were only a legend, historians could have dismissed him long ago as the invention of storytellers. But the archives of 17th century France hold scattered fragments that confirm he was real. These records are not complete narratives but cryptic entries, directives, and memoranda. Each detail is like a piece of broken glass, sharp, fragile, and difficult to fit into the larger puzzle. And yet, by carefully piecing them together, scholars have begun to trace the outlines of his long captivity. The first name linked to him is Eustache d'Auger, which appears in correspondence between French officials around 1669. On its surface, it looks like a common French name, but nothing about his treatment was ordinary. He was arrested under the highest secrecy and sent to the fortress of Pignerol in the Alps. There, under the watch of Governor Benigno de Saint-Mars, he lived in strict isolation. Saint-Mars received clear instructions. d'Auger could not speak to other prisoners, nor could guards exchange a single word with him. If anyone asked, they were to say nothing beyond acknowledging his existence. In an era when prisons were filled with thieves, debtors, and political dissidents, such precautions were highly unusual. From Pignerol, the trail of documents leads to other fortresses. When Saint-Mars was reassigned to Exil, d'Auger followed. Later, when he was given charge of the island prison of Sainte Marguerite off the coast of Cannes, d'Auger was moved again, still in secrecy. Each transfer required heavy escort, elaborate planning, and coded correspondence. The orders often included reminders that the prisoner must remain masked whenever he might be seen by outsiders. This is where the legend of the Iron Mask takes root. Surviving letters suggest it was not a literal iron cage around his head, but a velvet covering, used to obscure his identity. Still, the effect was the same. He was faceless. Eyewitnesses added small but telling details. A soldier stationed at Sainte Marguerite later claimed to have glimpsed the prisoner walking with his mask, noting that he seemed to receive better food and treatment than common inmates. At the Bastille, where d'Auger eventually died, accounts describe him as middle-aged, well-behaved, and obedient to the point of resignation. Even his funeral record betrays layers of deception. The register of deaths at the Bastille lists him under the name Marchioli, almost certainly a false identity meant to throw off anyone attempting to trace his origins. After his burial, his cell was stripped of all belongings, his clothing burned, and his furniture destroyed. Every trace of his existence was systematically erased. The question historians still ask is why? Why would the Crown go to such lengths to maintain secrecy about a single prisoner? The documents reveal glimpses, but never the full picture. Some hint that d'Auger might have been connected to espionage or political betrayal, perhaps a servant who stumbled upon dangerous state secrets. Others suggest he knew something so compromising it could damage Louis XIV's reputation or threaten alliances. The fact that Saint-Mars, a trusted officer, was given lifelong responsibility for him shows the importance placed on keeping him hidden. What makes these fragments even more frustrating is that they often contradict each other. Some records describe him as a mere valet, others as someone of far greater status. Certain reports say the mask was worn constantly, while others imply it was required only during transfers or when outsiders might catch sight of him. Historians must sift through these inconsistencies, aware that officials in Louis XIV's government were masters of misdirection. The ambiguity may not be accidental, but deliberate, designed to obscure the truth for generations. Still, one undeniable fact emerges. This prisoner was not treated like an ordinary criminal. He was denied the most basic human freedom, the right to a name. His life was spent in silence, with even his face hidden from the world. The archives do not tell us exactly who he was, but they reveal the immense effort made to ensure that we may never know. In that silence, the mystery deepens, drawing us closer to the next question. If the records are incomplete, then perhaps the answer lies not in what was written, but in what was intentionally left unsaid. The theories that shocked the world. As the centuries passed, the fragments of archival evidence were not enough to satisfy the curiosity of those who tried to solve the mystery. The gaps in the story became fertile ground for imagination, speculation, and rumor. If official documents offered silence, then writers and philosophers filled that silence with theories, each more dramatic than the last. From royal conspiracies to disgraced diplomats, the prisoner without a face became a canvas onto which Europe projected its darkest suspicions. One of the first major voices to ignite speculation was Voltaire. Writing in the mid-18th century, he claimed the prisoner had been forced to wear an iron mask at all times, and that he was treated with deference bordering on reverence. Voltaire went further, suggesting the man was of noble blood, perhaps even the elder brother of Louis XIV. To the Enlightenment audience, this idea was electric. What if the king who called himself the Sun, the absolute ruler of France, had usurped a brother's birthright and locked him away forever? It was a story too powerful to resist, one that exposed the fragility of royal legitimacy. Alexandre Dumas later immortalized the idea in his novel, The Vicomte of Bragelonne, part of his famous Musketeer saga. In his telling, the man in the iron mask was the secret twin of Louis XIV, hidden away so that one king, and only one, could reign. Dumas's fictionalized account burned itself into popular imagination, creating an image so vivid that for many readers, it replaced any notion of historical truth. The twin brother theory became the most famous version of the story, repeated endlessly in plays, films, and even modern television. But other theories were equally bold. Some argued the prisoner was the illegitimate son of Anne of Austria, the Queen Mother, and Cardinal Mazarin, the powerful chief minister. If true, such a child would have been a scandal capable of undermining the monarchy's reputation. Others suggested he was not French at all, but an Italian diplomat, Ercole Antonio Mattioli, who betrayed France in secret negotiations. His capture and disappearance into French prisons aligned suspiciously with some of the records, leading certain historians to adopt him as their favored candidate. And then, there were the theories that bordered on the fantastical. Some whispered that the man was a disgraced general, punished for knowing too much about the failures of war. Others believed he was connected to a plot involving England, a spy whose exposure would have embarrassed the crown. A handful even suggested alchemy or occult secrets, fitting the atmosphere of superstition that still lingered in the 17th century. What united all these theories was not their credibility, but their ability to shock. Each carried within it a sense of forbidden knowledge, the idea that the prisoner represented something France could never admit publicly. In a time when monarchy was absolute, secrets were not mere gossip. They were weapons. To believe the man was a royal twin, a hidden son, or a diplomat betrayed by his own ambitions, was to believe the French crown was capable of extraordinary cruelty to preserve its power. Over time, more than 50 different names were proposed. None fit perfectly, but each told us something about the anxieties of the era. Royalist writers preferred explanations that reinforced the glory of the monarchy, casting the prisoner as a dangerous traitor whose confinement was justified. Critics of absolutism gravitated toward the opposite view, seeing him as an innocent victim crushed under the weight of royal secrecy. The fact that no single theory could be proven only heightened the sense of mystery. Even today, these stories linger because they capture something deeper than a missing identity. They reflect humanity's fascination with hidden truths, with the possibility that behind the grandeur of palaces and the authority of kings lies a dark and fragile secret. The mask itself became more than a disguise. It was a symbol of the lies and cover-ups on which great powers rest. And as each theory rose and fell, one haunting question remained. Could the truth be even darker than fiction? A breakthrough in the case. For centuries, the man in the iron mask remained locked inside the realm of myth, his story distorted by writers and reimagined in popular culture. Yet in the 20th and 21st centuries, as historians returned to the archives with fresh eyes and modern methods, cracks began to form in the old legends. The twin brother tales, the secret royal heir theories, and the idea of an iron mask worn every waking hour began to collapse under the weight of documentary evidence. The truth, it turned out, might be far less glamorous but far more unsettling. The key figure in this renewed investigation is the name that has lingered in the records since the beginning: Eustache d'Auger. Letters exchanged between ministers of Louis XIV mention this name repeatedly, often attached to strict instructions about secrecy. At first, scholars dismissed d'Auger as a decoy name, a cover for someone more important. But as more material surfaced, it became harder to ignore that d'Auger was central to the puzzle. He was not a royal twin or a high-ranking nobleman, but something more unexpected: a valet. Why would a valet, a man of humble status, be imprisoned with such obsessive secrecy? That question has consumed recent historians. Professor Paul Sonnino, after years of combing through obscure French and Vatican archives, argued that d'Auger had stumbled into matters far above his station. He may have been connected to espionage between France and England, or entangled in the affairs of powerful ministers like Cardinal Mazarin and Nicolas Fouquet. According to reports, d'Auger possibly knew about political betrayals or financial scandals that could have destabilized the monarchy if they became public. His crime was not what he did, but what he knew. This is where the story turns darker. If Sonnino and others are correct, the reason for d'Auger's decades-long silence was not because of who he was, but because of what he carried in his memory. By erasing his identity, masking his face when necessary, and moving him from prison to prison under Saint-Mars's supervision, Louis XIV ensured that dangerous knowledge could never escape into the world. The mask, then, was not only a physical barrier, but a symbol of enforced invisibility. The deeper one looks, the more this explanation makes sense. The Bastille's register, listing the prisoner as Marchioli at his death, seems deliberately false, a final misdirection to bury his true name. The strict orders to burn his possessions and scrub his cell clean upon his death point, not to a royal heir but to a man whose very existence posed a risk to the crown. If d'Auger was indeed the man behind the mask, then the story becomes one, not of hidden kings, but of how absolute power can destroy an ordinary life without trial or explanation. Yet historians remain cautious. Some documents suggest d'Auger was treated with surprising dignity, even respect, hinting at higher status. Others raise the possibility that his case overlapped with figures like the Italian diplomat Mattioli. In the absence of a single definitive record, the debate continues. Still, the consensus has shifted. The man was most likely d'Auger, not a prince, and his imprisonment was a political act of silencing rather than an accident of birth. What makes this breakthrough so striking is that it strips away the romantic veil and replaces it with something colder. The truth, as modern research suggests, may be that the man in the iron mask was not a grand figure of legend, but an ordinary servant condemned to live faceless because he knew too much. This revelation unsettles us because it shows how fragile human identity can be under an all-powerful regime. In Louis XIV's France, the glory of the Sun King required shadows, and d'Auger was one of those shadows, hidden so thoroughly that even history nearly forgot him. The mask comes off. After centuries of speculation, the story has reached a turning point. Theories of royal twins and illegitimate heirs may still capture the imagination, but according to reports, historians argue that the pieces of the puzzle now align around a far less romantic truth. The man who spent decades hidden behind a mask, shuttled from one fortress to another, was most likely Eustache d'Auger, a valet caught in the web of state secrets too dangerous to expose. It is here that the narrative takes a grim twist, for when we follow this line of evidence, we arrive at an unsettling conclusion. Historians finally solved the Iron Mask mystery, and it's not good. The phrase "finally solved" is itself controversial. The French archives do not contain a single confession or a neat declaration naming d'Auger outright. What they do contain is a network of correspondence, orders, and coded references that, when assembled, all point toward him. His arrest in 1669 coincides with the sudden appearance of a mysterious prisoner under Saint-Mar's care. His movements mirror those of the man in the mask, from Pignerol to Exil, then to Sainte-Marguerite, and finally to the Bastille. His presence in sensitive political circles before his arrest explains why such secrecy was necessary. The logic is simple. Daguerre was imprisoned not because of who he was, but because of what he knew. And that knowledge, according to some historians, was damning. Daguerre may have been privy to high-level espionage involving England or financial scandals tied to Fouquet and Mazarin. He may have overheard details that, if leaked, could have shaken Louis XIV's alliances or tarnished the crown's reputation. In the absolutist world of 17th century France, such knowledge was as dangerous as treason. The king's solution was silence, permanent, unbreakable silence. This interpretation leaves behind the romance of Dumas' novels and instead forces us to look at the raw cruelty of absolute monarchy. An ordinary man, stripped of his name, condemned to live faceless, became a warning of what could happen to anyone who stumbled too close to forbidden truths. His treatment was both meticulous and merciless. Better food and private cells could not disguise the fact that his life was erased, his death disguised, and his memory intended to vanish. What makes this revelation disturbing is that it reduces one of history's most glamorous mysteries to a tale of power-crushing powerlessness. For generations, people wanted to believe the mask hid a prince, a twin, a figure of destiny. Instead, the strongest evidence suggests it covered the face of a valet whose misfortune was to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, overhearing the wrong secrets. Far from elevating him to legend, the mask was meant to erase him from the human story altogether. And yet, the story survived. Even in silence, even in the void left by destroyed records and false names, the image of the masked prisoner endured. That survival alone undermines the attempt to erase him. But if the historians are correct, then the truth is not noble or heroic. It is chilling. The Iron Mask was never about protecting France from scandalous rumors of royal twins. It was about a monarchy's ruthless determination to bury a man alive, ensuring that no whisper of his knowledge ever escaped into the light. The aftermath and the questions that remain. If the mystery of the man in the Iron Mask is now, as some historians argue, finally solved, the answer is far from satisfying. Instead of a royal heir erased from history or a twin brother hidden away to preserve the throne, the most convincing explanation points to Eustache Daguerre, a valet silenced for secrets he should never have known. But this conclusion does not close the case. It opens a darker set of questions. What could a man of such modest station have discovered that terrified Louis XIV enough to strip him of his very identity? According to reports, Daguerre's connection to espionage and state intrigue may explain why he was treated so differently from ordinary prisoners. His confinement was not chaotic, but carefully orchestrated. He was not beaten into submission, but locked into silence. His movements tracked for decades, his face covered whenever he might be seen. Such treatment suggests a message. Some secrets are too dangerous to share, even with the passage of time. And yet, the crown's obsessive secrecy has backfired. By trying to erase him completely, the monarchy gave him a kind of immortality. Generations of writers, philosophers, and historians chased his shadow, building theories that ranged from the plausible to the fantastical. Voltaire gave him royal blood, Dumas gave him a twin, and cinema turned him into a tragic hero. The mask itself became one of the most enduring symbols of hidden truth in all of European history. Ironically, the attempt to make him invisible made him unforgettable. But if Daguerre truly was the man, then the unsettling reality is that his story represents something deeper. The brutal power of a system that could erase an individual simply because he knew too much. The legend loses its romance, but it gains a chilling lesson. It is not about kings and lost heirs. It is about how fragile life and identity can be when authority is absolute. Even so, the final pages of this story remain unwritten. We still do not know the precise secret Daguerre carried, nor why silence was worth more than his life. Perhaps the truth lies in archives yet to be uncovered, or perhaps it was buried with him in 1703. For now, all that remains is the haunting image of a man hidden behind a mask, his face and his name taken away, his silence echoing louder than any confession could. The mystery may be narrowed, but its shadow lingers, reminding us that history rarely gives up all of its secrets. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments.